Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Dear Bob, thank you very much for the invitation to this great New Zealand Animal Welfare Conference in October 2013. Unfortunately, as being a Zurich-based lawyer in Switzerland, for this time I could not make it, but I'd love to see you soon on eye level, and for the moment it's about to speak to you about what I think is the deeper meaning and the perspective of the animal as a sentient being is concerned. The animal as a sentient being, I speak to you on that because on one side, when I was the animal welfare attorney of the canton of Zurich, I had to handle cases of animal mistreatment and the law enforcement. On the other hand, we changed the constitution in Switzerland, I think worldwide unique as far as the dignity of creature is concerned. I live in Europe, although Switzerland is not a part of the European Union, but in Europe there have changes been made in legislation, and let me give you some ideas as far as the animal in the New Zealand legislation is concerned. Always on the fact that animals might be looked at sentient beings. We know that animals are sentient beings. Everyone in the room who has treated animals, who lived with animals, who knows animals, or at least thinks to know animals, sees that animals can suffer, have feelings, can express themselves. Sometimes they express themselves in a way we do not understand. And my thinking is that all those of you of us who do so-called love animals should first say we should try to know the animal's interests first, and to fulfill these interests as best as possible. And if the love, the sympathy, the empathy comes on top, this is great. Most of the cases of animal abuse I had on the table were the expression of the fact that the animal's owners did not know the animal's needs and interests. So by that, I want to step into the fact that animals are sentient beings. We feel it, you see it, it's obvious. Why is this in discussion? Why is it so important now worldwide to be a topic to be spoken to? This is why, the reason is because there was a high pressure on the European Commission and coming from the European Union to change the European treaty as far as animals are concerned. It was meant, and now has been realized, that animal welfare does play an important role on the EU, on the European Union's level. Not only to say that that the European states in the EU should handle the animal welfare issue much more closely. It's also about that they should protect the animals as sentient beings. It reads like that in Article 13 of the Treaty of the Functioning of the European Union. I quote, "In formulating and implementing the Union's agriculture, fisheries, transport, international market, research and technological development and space policies, the Union and the Member States shall, since animals are sentient beings, pay full regard to the welfare requirements of animals while respecting the legislative or administrative provisions and customs of the Member States relating in particular to religious rites, cultural traditions, and regional heritage. Let's come to the meat or to the tofu. The animals are sentient beings. What does it mean? It's a provision that just expresses what we feel that they are sentient beings. It's a nice term. It warms up the heart. It's juicy and fruity to have this pattern in mind. And it's a yes also from the fishers industry, agricultural industry, etc., that they agree to that. The basic thinking of that is that animals should be protected from a legal point of view because they can suffer. Sentient being means it's a being that can suffer. If you mistreat such an animal, it is suffering. This basis of suffering is key argument having been worked out by Jeremy Bentham, a philosopher in the 1780s in the UK, who wrote, "We should protect animals because they can suffer." We do not like, as human beings, animals suffering in front of our eyes, and this is why almost every state worldwide has a ban on animal mistreatment as far as their suffering is concerned. I do like this aspect, of course. It's an important basis for also, even if not explicit, at least as a basis also of the New Zealand Animal Welfare Amendment Bill 2013 and the other legislation. It is kind of, yes, it would be nice to have animals as sentient beings also as a declaration therein. What I am not feeling comfortable so much about it is that by that you lose a great potential of going much more ahead. Meaning, if we reduce an animal, a living being, to be able to suffer, then we should prove as human beings, when does this suffer begin? We have about 95% of the species that do not have vertebrates. They are invertebrates, like insects, etc., etc. And I do think there is an obligation also to have them in our abode of society, also the invertebrates. There is a discussion, do they feel suffer or not? Do they just avoid kind of disagreeable measures? By speaking of the sentient being concept, we risk to forget about the invertebrates. We also do not open the discussion if a use of an animal is abusive, if the goal is not correct. So even though an animal is a sentient being, then it's still allowed to make animal experiments on this, although the goal of this animal experiment might be completely senseless, has been worked out in other places of the world, can be easily replaced or reduced of the suffering, but it's not a strong weapon for a good animal welfare legislation. This is why in Switzerland in 1989, when I wrote my legal thesis on animal welfare and fundamental human rights, worked with an animal ethicist, a specialist in that. He found out that a Swiss well-known theologist, Karl Barth, wrote in 1945, animals should be protected in their dignity. The dignity of animals is now, we worked on this issue for 3 years, the dignity of animals is protected by the Swiss Constitution since 1992, and the quite modern animal welfare legislation in Switzerland, 2005, is based on the term of the dignity of creature. This means that the animals have a inner goal of being an animal. It should not be abused for goals that it is not meant to be, and the animals have acknowledged an inherent value and should be protected in much more aspects than only against suffering. So for example, by that we also have a ban on sexual relationships with animals, because even though they might not suffer, from a vet point of view, they are not meant to be abused for these reasons. Having said that, I think the term of the dignity of animal is a concept that has been worked out before in 1790s from a Danish philosopher. If we would have taken, instead of Jeremy Bentham's theory, this Lawrence Smith theory about the dignity of creatures, all the animal welfare legislation would be much more open and not only reduced on the fact of being anti-cruelty, but pro-dignity. We feel exactly when a human being is not protecting the dignity, the integrity, and the interest of animals, not only being free of suffering, but also being able to express itself, to be in best housing conditions, to be kept in a social environment, and to be able to interact with other species from the same animals or other species as well. Based on that, as I said recently, horses must not be tied up, and they must be kept in close enough proximity to other horses so that they are able to see, hear, and smell them. This has nothing to do with animals as sentient beings, kind of restricted to the avoiding of suffering. It's about giving horses here an environment that is really horse-friendly. Puppies may not be separated from their mothers before 46 days after birth. Also, these and a lot of other measures in Swiss Animal Welfare Ordinance that goes more into details than the Swiss Animal Welfare Act do protect the inner value of an animal much more than just being based on the term of sentient being or on the concept of co-created being. Like in Germany, they speak of Mitgeschöpf, so being a co-created being. For a long time, Switzerland has been looked, there was no discussion on that before the Harvard University gave a prize to Switzerland for having the most senseless science on the content of the dignity of creatures, including plants. But I saw that the South Korean Animal Welfare Act took over the term, I think in 2008, of dignity of the animals to be protected, and also quite similar, the legislation of the Netherlands in 2011, Article 1.3 of the Dutch Animals Act speaks of the inherent value to be protected of animals. Let me suggest that New Zealand might step into, I wouldn't say fight because this sounds too aggressive, and just build up enemies, but should stand up for saying yes to the animal's dignity, either in what might be called New Zealand Constitution, because there is no written one, but at least in the coming New Zealand Animal Welfare Act, in the amendment, or just in the new act, there is a lot of thinking around, especially in German literature, because it started in Germany and in Switzerland, about what the interest of the animal in being protected in its dignity or in its inherent value is concerned, what does it mean for farm animals not to be kept a long time in chain, to be able to have to express the natural behavior as largely as possible, that it should be banned. It's not yet, but it should be banned to cut the horn, to decut, so to take the horns away of the cows, because they express themselves with the horns. So by that, saying yes to the dignity of creature far beyond the term of the sentient beings, we have a pattern to think all the measurements and all the human behavior towards animals through other eyes. Let me motivate you to stand up for animals as sentient beings in the legislation of New Zealand, not forgetting that there are much larger terms to be brought in, term like the dignity of creature or the animals to be protected in their inherent value. New Zealand would not be the first country worldwide to say so. Let me remind you to South Korea, to the Netherlands, and to Switzerland to make a big step ahead. When I read through the papers, the official papers to the drafted New Zealand Animal Welfare Act, the Amendment Bill 2013, from the officials to say we are proud and are working on New Zealand being the #1 in animal welfare, then take those wording seriously. Ask them to make it really happen, to make the animal welfare really fly in New Zealand, also by taking the dignity of creature into New Zealand Animal Welfare Act. It would be a big step, because you would be in the English-speaking world. Besides South Korea, they speak the two languages, as I know. But concerning Australia, I've been there for a month with an animal welfare lecture series. UK or US, you could be #1, really saying we are leading the English-speaking part of the world by saying yes to the animal's dignity, or at least the inherent value, and start the discussion on our relationship to animals on a very high basis. I wish you, I wish us good luck. I'd love to be helpful to New Zealand to do so, because the impact for the animals would be tremendous. And if we human beings see a possibility to do good for animals, we have to take this chance, this occasion, and I wish us good luck. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.